in changing the rules for welfare recipients' work regulations. Live coverage begins right now.
As a mentor, confidant, and a close friend. While Ricky was employed as my district director, he served the people of the District 11. This service to his neighbors was a task he lived every day. Ricky routinely logged hundreds of miles a week, drove to every corner of District 11. Through his work, he touched the lives of thousands of Texans. There was no problem in our district that was too small for his attention or too big for his talents. During these travels, Ricky never once met a stranger. With his easy smile and open demeanor, Ricky would make everyone feel like they'd been his friend for a lifetime. But during all of these travels and meetings, too many to count, he never forgot that his home was Comanche, Texas. Comanche is every much as part of Ricky as his fingers and his toes. It was a community he was raised in, the community that taught him the character and morals that would guide his life. Perhaps that is also where he inherited his stubborn streak. Ricky had a confidence in the possibilities that could be, in spite of the limited vision of those around him. You could see this in him every day as he quietly refused to yield to mediocrity or to compromise his principles. It was his stubbornness that set Ricky apart from the crowd, and that's where I believe he was most comfortable, just a little further up the path, showing the rest of us the way. Today, Ricky is still just a little further up the path, showing us the way, as he showed us how he carried himself in the face of those deep difficulties toward the end of his life. We'll remember Ricky as he will want to be remembered, a faithful friend, a tireless worker whose hopeful, idealistic, daring, and decent way of life inspired us all. To those of us who knew him and worked with him, he was like family, and his loss will be we felt every time we gathered together without him. He'll never be replaced or forgotten, and I ask you for your prayers for Ricky and his family and those of us who loved him. I miss my friend. Go back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been two struggles to make American democracy work. First was who would be eligible to vote. Originally, only those who were white, male, property owners over 21, perhaps a quarter of the population. More than three-quarters of a century later, having fought a civil war, African Americans were granted the franchise. It would be another two-thirds of a century before voting rights were extended to women. Finally, in a battle that I was proud to be a part of as a college student, campaigning and testifying before Congress, we adopted the 26th Amendment, extending the voting rights to young people at age 18. But there's always been a second battle. Who amongst the theoretically eligible voters are actually able to cast their ballot and have it counted? It's no secret, in the states of the Old South waged a brutal extra-legal war to prevent newly enfranchised African Americans from exercising it. The discrimination, intimidation, and violence are well chronicled. And it's why almost a century after African Americans were given the legal right to vote, we still needed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to give them the vote supposedly guaranteed under the Constitution. Despite the Voting Rights Act and 2 centuries of struggle, there's still a battle today. Part of the Republican game plan for 2012 is to make voting difficult or impossible for some of the same groups who have long suffered discrimination, who are now seriously disadvantaged by new voter suppression laws that have been passed by Republicans in states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Because voter fraud is a federal offense with serious legal consequences, even jail time, improperly cast ballots are virtually non-existent in the United States. There are far more votes that are lost due to malfunctioning mistakes and sleight of hand by local elected officials who are either inept or cheating than all the cases that have been documented nationwide. In Texas, for example, another effort to pass aggressive voter ID legislation, they could find only 5 documented incidents of voter fraud in 13 million ballots cast in the last 2 elections. In Pennsylvania, there have been fewer than you can count on your fingers, and up to 1 million people may be denied the right to vote because of these legal changes. Millions of poor, elderly, minority, and student voters don't have passports, driver's license. Some don't even have birth certificates. They may face the modern version of a poll tax, and that's unconscionable. The media and courts are pushing back on some of the more outrageous behaviors, like Ohio Secretary of State John Husted, who was called out and forced to back down after he tried to limit early voting in counties with Democrats in the majority while expanding them in Republican counties. But come Election Day, the problems will still persist. But there is a solution. Pry partisan fingers off the controls of a varied election process. We shouldn't be treating the precious right to vote as a game where partisan advantage comes at the expense of our civil rights. Oregon has been involved for 25 years with what is no longer an experiment, but a display of a better way. Vote by mail. Each registered voter in the state is mailed a ballot to their residence 19 days before the election. They are given over 400 hours to examine the ballot, they make their decision on the issues and individuals, and return it by mail or in person. Oregonians don't worry about people gaming voting machines, closing precincts early, having long lines for working people at the end of the day, or mysteriously running out of ballots at precincts that are likely to vote against you. In Oregon, there's no problem with illegal voting. Everybody has access to the ballot, and results are processed in a timely fashion. It's shameful that after more than 2 centuries of struggle for the right to vote, we're still playing games with people's opportunity to exercise that hard-won privilege upon which our democratic tradition rests. I will be championing the Oregon solution of vote by mail to make the process simpler, more reliably, most important, fairer, while saving money in the process. I hope these blatant attempts at manipulation and discrimination backfire so that the next Congress and the administration is positioned to do something about it. A country that prides itself as the oldest democracy deserves for the democratic process to work.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from South Dakota, Ms. Noem, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the second to the last day that we will be here and be in session before we head home to our districts, and we still do not have a farm bill that gives certainty to our producers and our ranchers across the country. In a little over a week, the 2008 Farm Bill is going to expire. While many of these programs will continue into the future for months ahead, we have an opportunity to actually save money and give our producers certainty as they begin planning for the coming years. Last week I sat down and I visited with Mike and Lori. They're producers from near the town of Huron, South Dakota. They raise corn, soybeans, and beef cattle, and this year was particularly difficult for them in light of the drought situation that producers in South Dakota were facing. Thankfully, they had programs such as crop insurance that helped them manage their risk in such a difficult year. They wrote me a letter on the importance of the Farm Bill, and I want to read a portion of that letter to you. We're experiencing a severe drought in our area this year. We put up half of the hay that we normally do. Dugouts are starting to dry up, and crop yields will be down significantly. Crop insurance will be extremely important to offset lost crop production and lost revenue due to poor crop conditions. Crop insurance is a vital part of providing stability in our income and allowing us to stay a viable family farm dedicated to growing a safe, affordable food supply for the growing world. They went on in their letter to describe exactly what this means to their family at home. We have a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. We tell them daily how important our jobs are as farmers, how we're truly feeding the world. They are taking true pride and ownership of that, and passing a farm bill only helps stabilize their dreams, their futures, and ours. A 5-year farm bill gives us the stability to plan ahead for our operation long term. With the limited time Congress has to pass a farm bill before the current one expires, I would encourage lawmakers to look to rural America and to realize how much work we can get done in a week. We know that if a farm bill is made a priority, there's still enough time to get one passed. Thank you again for your work, and we urge Congress to pass a farm bill now. This past week, I was traveling through the middle of our state in an area that's been hit particularly hard by the drought. I stopped at a truck stop and visited with many producers that were there filling with fuel and getting supplies to head back out to the field. You see, right now in South Dakota, producers are planting a winter wheat crop, and they're having to make the decision, do we put that crop into dry ground or do we wait and wait and see if we get a farm bill and crop insurance into the future so that they have the certainty that they have to make sure that their risk is managed. Many of those producers were electing not to plant. They were waiting to see if they could get a rain and get a program that would actually keep their family in business. Some were putting it in the ground, showing that they truly are brave producers who have a little faith that the skies will open up and that next year will be different. I'll tell you, they and Mike and Lori and other producers across the state of South Dakota and across this country that have been particularly hit in these tough times are looking to us here in Congress to provide them certainty during this drought. The Farm Bill is one of the reasons that our family farmers are able to stay in business during tough years. Many other programs in the Farm Bill give them the stability, the certainty, which in turn gives every American certainty in having a reliable, affordable food supply. You know, I ran for Congress to bring more common sense to this place, to be efficient and effective leader for South Dakota. We have an opportunity to get a Farm Bill done this year that provides a safety net and real reforms for our producers and cost savings for the taxpayers. While the clock hasn't run out yet, I think it's important that we get our work done on time, and I'm disappointed that it hasn't been scheduled for a vote. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Gutierrez, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, today we will vote on a Republican proposal to provide green cards to certain immigrants and to cut the same number of green cards available to other legal immigrants. How do we determine who gets more green cards and who gets fewer? For my Republican friends, that's easy. They will provide more green cards to a very narrow number of immigrants they can tolerate. Smart immigrants who have been educated in U.S. colleges and universities. They will make other legal immigrants, ones they can't tolerate, pay for that increase. Meanwhile, Democrats have introduced bills that would provide green cards to immigrants who have been educated in U.S. colleges and universities. Our Democratic proposal, however, does not take green cards away from other deserving immigrants who want to come legally and contribute to this country. On our side of the aisle, we respect all immigrants. Our bill recognizes the value of all of them to our economy and indeed to our future. We should not educate some of the world's most talented people in the STEM fields, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, and then send them away to work in foreign lands to compete against us. Democrats strongly support providing these visas as a way of helping the U.S. economy and creating jobs, not just for immigrants, but for the U.S. workers they will employ and the economic activity that they will generate. Democrats want progress. We want visas for STEM graduates. We'll work in a bipartisan manner with Republicans to get it done. It's smart policy and it's a just policy. And there is no reason, let me be clear, no economic reason, no budget reason, no jobs reason to punish other immigrants because we give out STEM visas. Absolutely none. Let me try to make it simple. Let's pretend we're not talking about immigrants, because anytime some of my Republican friends hear the word immigrants, they immediately want to punish someone. So let's say instead of immigrants, we're talking about a family of 3 children, 3 honest, hardworking children. One child wants to go to college to become an industrial engineer. Another wants to go to college to become a math professor. The third, a diligent, industrious child, doesn't want to go to college. Let's say he wants to start a landscaping business. He wants to work with the land and get his hands dirty. The Republican plan is simple. Help the kids go into college and cut the other kid off. He's out, tough luck, not smart enough for this family. The Democratic plan is just as simple. We need scientists, engineers, and mathematicians, but we need other workers too, construction workers, machinists, chefs, entrepreneurs, and we need immigrants from all over the world, from every continent, including Africa. Everyone who works hard helps our economy, so let's be helpful to everyone. That's the Democratic belief. But that's not the Republican plan today. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised. After all, this proposal comes from a party whose presidential nominee doesn't care about 47% of America. Call it the Mitt Romney deadbeat doctrine. Half of all Americans are freeloaders. And maybe that's all we need to know about this Republican plan. I suppose in the Republican world, STEM visas are for the half of America that works, and the other visas are for the deadbeats that Mitt Romney doesn't care about. You know, the freeloaders like your parents on Social Security, or your son or daughter with that student loan or the Pell Grant, or like my parents who came from Puerto Rico with only an elementary school education, but worked hard every day and put 2 kids through college, and one of them in the Congress of the United States. Yes, those deadbeats. If my parents had needed visas to come to this country today, under this new plan, they would have never have gotten a chance. We're changing the rules about who can, and more importantly, who cannot come to America. So unless you view the world through Mitt Romney's us versus them vision of America, there's no reason to cut visas today, none. I want to stand up for the Zoe Lofgren vision of immigration, the Democratic vision of immigration. We're not divided into a country where people who gather at a fancy country club and write $50,000 checks to political candidates are good, and the people who stand around and serve them the food are bad. America is not half deadbeats. We're one America, and we have a chance to prove it today. Democrats are offering a sensible plan that doesn't divide us. It values all work from all immigrants. It achieves our common goal of creating a STEM visa program, keeping more scientists, engineers right here in America, making us stronger. In Mitt Romney's world, if you help one person, you have to punish another. I think that's wrong. I urge my colleagues to pass a fair and sensible plan to create a STEM visa program, and let's do it without punishing a single person.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I rise with a heavy heart, but on behalf of a grateful nation to honor a soldier born and raised in southwestern Pennsylvania who gave his life on September 14th in service to our country. This week he returned to his home, the United States, where he will be laid to rest. Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Raible, commanding officer of Marine Attack Squadron 211, died in the assault on Camp Bastion connected to the American-run base Camp Leatherneck in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. It was a despicable attack by the Taliban that not only took the life of this dedicated, respected, and brave Marine, but also resulted in the worst loss of U.S. military aircraft since the Vietnam War. But this morning I rise so my colleagues, my constituents at home in Westmoreland County, and the entire nation will know more about this courageous Marine, known as Otis, who commanded a Marine Harrier jet squadron. After graduating top of his class from Norwin High School, where he was a starting defensive back for the Norwin Knights, Lieutenant Colonel Raible earned his degree in civil engineering from Pittsburgh's prestigious Carnegie Mellon University. Following his college graduation, Raible joined the United States Marine Corps and by 1998 had become a naval aviator. A natural leader, Raible rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel last summer, having received numerous military honors along the way, including a Meritorious Service Medal, 10 Strike Fight Awards, and a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, to name just a few. In support of Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, Raible deployed many times to serve our nation. Colonel Raible commanded the only Marine Harrier squadron in Afghanistan, where he flew over 2,000 hours in Harrier aircraft. A southwestern Pennsylvanian at heart, it should come as no surprise that Otis was known, while seated in the cockpit, to listen to the Steelers while flying in the skies over Iraq. But more than anything, Lieutenant Colonel Raible was a father, a husband, and a son. A proud dad of 3 children ages 11, 9, and 2. Otis so loved and was loved by his family. As his mother, Belvina of North Huntington, Pennsylvania, said, her son died defending all that he held dear. Quote, he was the best of the best, she said. Indeed, Mrs. Raible, he was. Today, we as a nation say thank you to Lieutenant Colonel Raible and to his entire family. We are so grateful for your service and for your sacrifice protecting our freedom. Through your service, you have made your family and your nation better. Through your sacrifice, you have made America stronger. Through your courage, you have made America proud. And many times, I'm sure you soared above the clouds where you could touch the face of God. Now you rest in his loving arms for eternity. Thank you, Colonel. Our nation thanks you as well. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Mr. Pierluisi, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 6th, the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico will hold a plebiscite on the island's political future. Voters will be asked if they want to continue the current status or to seek a new status. Voters will also be asked to express their preference among the three alternatives to the current status recognized as legally and politically viable by the federal government and international law: independence, nationhood in free association with the United States, and statehood. This plebiscite is different from previous plebiscites in Puerto Rico. It will be the first time that island residents have an opportunity to answer yes or no to the question of whether they support the status that Puerto Rico has had since 1898. This question has inherent value in a democracy, where a government's legitimacy is based on the consent of the governed. And this plebiscite will only include those status options identified as valid by Congress and the White House. True self-determination is a choice among options that can be implemented, not an exercise in wishful thinking. If a majority of voters express satisfaction with the current status, Puerto Rico's status would not change at this time. Likewise, if there is majority support to change the current status, but not majority support for one of the three alternatives, Puerto Rico's current status would also continue. However, if a majority votes against the status quo and in favor of statehood, free association, or independence, Congress and the President should take action that honors that choice. Top Democratic and Republican leaders have indicated that they will take the results of this plebiscite seriously. That is as it should be. The United States is the greatest democracy in history and a champion of peaceful self-determination around the world. Consistent with this principle, I am confident that federal officials will respect the choice made by their fellow American citizens from Puerto Rico if they express a clear desire to change the island status. Now, I want to speak directly to the men and women I represent in Congress. This plebiscite will have a real impact on you, your family, and the future of the island we love. It is important that you make your voice heard and your vote count. It is well known that I oppose the current status and advocate for statehood for Puerto Rico. Whether it is called territory, commonwealth, or colony, the current status denies us the most fundamental rights in a democracy: the right to choose the leaders who make our national laws, and the right to equal treatment under those laws. In my view, the current status is an affront to our dignity. In my office hangs a framed photo of service members from the island who have lost their lives since 2001. They're the latest in a long line of Puerto Rican patriots who have fought and fallen for this nation. This photo inspires me, but it also makes me sad. I cannot understand how we, such a proud people, can voluntarily submit to a status that makes us second-class citizens in the country that we have defended for generations. I realize that after nearly 115 years, the prospect of change can be unsettling. But I also know that there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. We deserve better than what we have, and the time has come for us to seek a new status that will empower us to realize our full potential. Among the alternatives to the current status, I believe statehood is the right choice. Independence and free association are worthy options, but both would place at risk our U.S. citizenship and federal support under programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security for future generations of Puerto Ricans. Because I believe the overwhelming majority of Puerto Ricans are opposed to breaking or substantially weakening the strong political, social, and economic bonds that have formed between Puerto Rico and the United States, I think the only viable alternative to the status quo is statehood. At this critical moment in history, we should aspire to perfect our union, not to sever it. The current status is about second-class citizenship, which we should rise up to reject. Independence and free association are about separation, which would diminish the opportunities available to our children and grandchildren. Statehood is about equal treatment. It would deliver to Puerto Rico what all free people deserve: full voting rights, full self-government, and full equality under the law. This November, I hope that the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico will send a clear message to Congress that they're ready to make a change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to honor the life and memory of Pennsylvania police officer Bradley Fox. Brad Fox was a 5-year veteran of the Plymouth Township Police Department in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Having grown up in my home of Bucks County, Officer Fox graduated from William Tennant High School and went on to serve his country for 10 years in the United States Marine Corps. A well-decorated soldier, Officer Fox received, among other accolades, the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon, and the National Defense Service Medal. Upon returning from his military service, Officer Fox joined his local police force in Montgomery County, where he built a life for himself, his wife Lindsay, their daughter, and a second child who was on the way. On the night of Thursday, September 13, the family, friends, and fellow officers of Brad Fox received the phone call they hoped would never come. Officer Fox was responding to a report of a hit and run in his suburban Philadelphia township. As he was investigating the incident, both Officer Fox and his canine companion were ambushed by the suspect, an attack which left Officer Fox fatally wounded. Yesterday afternoon, I attended the burial services for Officer Fox at the Washington Crossing National Cemetery in Bucks County. The show of support from the local law enforcement community and the people of southeastern Pennsylvania as a whole was inspiring, and it was heartfelt. To see that in such a short lifetime, this father, husband, brother, son, veteran, and police officer had touched so many lives was a testament to the kind of person that Brad Fox was. He dedicated his entire life to service to his community and to his country, and should serve as an example to every one of us. Every day in Montgomery County and in Bucks County and in communities across this great nation, law enforcement officers, firefighters, and paramedics are working to preserve the public safety. These men and women wake up every morning and head to work not knowing what dangers they may encounter during their shift. The loss of Officer Brad Fox serves as a somber reminder of the risks our police officers face each and every day. Here in our nation's capital, just a few miles from where I stand at this very moment, is the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. Etched into this memorial are the names of countless men and women who gave their lives in service to their communities. Sadly, Officer Brad Fox will join that roll of honor. Also carved on the memorial are quotes which capture the spirit of those honored there, including one from former President George H.W. Bush, which reads, "Carved on these walls is the story of America, of a continuing quest to preserve both democracy and decency, and to protect a national treasure that we call the American dream." There can be no doubt that Officer Bradley Fox did his part in this quest to preserve the American dream. Our country owes a debt of gratitude to Officer Fox and to his family for the sacrifice he made and they made to keep his community a safe place to work and to live and to raise a family. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in April of the year 2004, I rose in this chamber to speak for 5 minutes about my conviction that the war in Iraq was a dangerous, immoral policy, and it was hurting America and our national security. Since then, I've delivered a similar message nearly every day that it was possible when we were in session. And once the Iraq War finally drew to a close, I moved on to focus on the ongoing military occupation of Afghanistan, which soon will be in its 11th year, costing us more than 2,000 American lives and more than $500 billion and counting. Today is my 440th special order for 5 minutes, calling for an end of these wars and the safe return of our troops to their families right here at home. I'm not proud of having reached that number. I would much prefer that the speeches were no longer necessary. But since I'm retiring from the House at the end of this year, my 20th year in Congress, one of my biggest disappointments is that we haven't shown the leadership, the courage, and the resolve to finally secure peace. We are still mired in this Afghanistan conflict, even though the evidence is overwhelming that it's doing more harm than good. Even though it's emboldening terrorists and insurgents rather than defeating them. Even though it's breeding resentment of America instead of winning hearts and minds. We are still mired in this conflict, even though a clear majority of the American people no longer want any part of it. I will not return to the House in 2013, so this will be one of my final opportunities to press this point. But as long as our troops remain in harm's way, and as long as this dreadful policy continues, I will continue to speak out and speak up. And I know there are many proud and fearless opponents of this war on both sides of the aisle who will continue to lead the effort right here in Congress. Time and time again, what I have advocated is not just an end to these wars, but the beginning of a new approach to combating terrorism and keeping America safe. We need to lead with the American cooperation and compassion around the world, not American weapons and brute force. We need smart security, a plan that puts the focus on development and diplomacy. We need a strategy that gives people hope and improves their lives instead of invading and occupying their lands. This is not only the humane approach, Mr. Speaker, it's also the more pragmatic one, the one that will truly advance our national security goals. And it's a lot more cost-effective. Helping people costs pennies on the dollar compared to waging war. A lot of people have said to me over the years, Woolsey, your problem is that you think we can have a perfect world. Well, consider me guilty as charged. I don't believe there's anything wrong with idealism and ambitious goals, because I'm absolutely certain that if we don't strive for a perfect world, we won't ever come close to providing a safe, secure, and peaceful world for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. And that's our job here in Congress. And I thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this week another American energy-producing company announced plant closures and worker layoffs, citing the Obama administration's authoritarian regulatory regime in part as a rationale for its decision. Yesterday, Alpha Natural Resources announced closures for 8 coal mines in 3 states, one of which is located in the 5th Congressional District of Pennsylvania, which I am proud to represent. Company officials in announcing the closure stated, and I quote, "a regulatory environment that's aggressively aimed at constraining the use of coal," end quotes. The decision will result in layoffs of 1,200 workers and immediate 400 jobs lost in Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The fact that the coal industry is facing tough times isn't news. They have other energy competitors, including natural gas, and challenges with coal transport costs, energy, and labor costs. The issue that's newsworthy is the additional burden being placed on American employers during such difficult and tough economic times. The administration announced intentions to eliminate coal, our most abundant natural resource from our fuel mix, with no clear plan to replace it with any effective alternative, has taken a significant toll on employers and individuals across my home state. Here are the several news headlines of closures and layoffs in my home district from the past several months. September 18th, headline, Alpha Natural Resources closing 8 coal mines. 1,200 company-wide layoffs, and an immediate 400 jobs cut in Virginia, West Virginia, and my home state of Pennsylvania. August 30th headline, another round of Joy workers laid off, the Derrick. In August, Joy Mining Manufacturing in Franklin, Venango County, Pennsylvania, posted another round of employee layoffs. 43 employees were notified they'd been furloughed from their jobs. The week before that, 19 others were laid off. Joy Mining is the largest private sector employer in Venango County. February 9th headline, local officials respond to Shawville power plant closure. GenOn Energy has about 80 employees at its plant in Shawville, Clearfield County, and contributes roughly $225,000 annually in local taxes. GenOn offers jobs not only through its plant, but through Ampfire coal and trucking firms, which means a loss of 100 to 200 workers in the next several years. January 26th headline, First Energy shutting down 6 sites in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. In January, First Energy announced that the new environmental regulations led to a decision to shut down 6 older coal-fired power plants in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maryland, affecting more than 500 employees. Coal operations are closing, forcing more workers into unemployment as countless indirect coal jobs have been put at risk because of the President's unwavering commitment to end coal, our most abundant natural resource, as a source of domestic energy. In the aftermath of all these closures and job losses in my district, along with numerous across my state and the country, it is becoming increasingly clear that this administration expects the consumers of Pennsylvania to bear the cost of a poorly thought out, poorly defined, and poorly explained environmental agenda. But it's not just a war on coal, it's a war on electricity and jobs. The shuttering of a record number of coal-fired power plants threatens thousands of the 550,270 direct and indirect coal-related jobs that help supply America with nearly half of its generated electricity and pay $36 billion in wages. The nonpartisan U.S. Energy Information Administration has all but confirmed the President's aggressive push against coal development with a report detailing a record number of coal-fired power plants to be closed this year, largely because of the burdensome regulations and other compliance costs. That's why this week the U.S. House will pass H.R. 3049 to push back on the President's commitment to end coal as a source of domestic energy and protect the countless jobs that have been lost or put at risk as a result of his politics. H.R. 3049 includes the following package of bills: the Coal Miners Employment and Domestic Energy Infrastructure Protection Act, which bars the Environmental Protection Agency from issuing any regulation before December 31, 2013 that would adversely affect coal mining employment. The Coal Residuals Reuse and Management Act, which establishes state-level permitting programs for the storage of coal combustion residuals under the Solid Waste Disposal Act, which is now primarily used to regulate the management of municipal solid waste landfills and sewage landfills. The Energy Tax Prevention Act, which prevents the EPA from regulating greenhouse gases in any effort to address climate change. The Clean Water Cooperative Federalism Act, which prohibits the EPA from issuing a new or revised water quality standard when a state standard has already been approved by the EPA. And the Transparency and Regulation Analysis of Impacts on the Nation Act, or the TRAIN Act, which creates an interagency committee to examine the effects of current and proposed federal regulations on U.S. energy and manufacturing industries, U.S. global competitiveness, and U.S. energy prices. Again, it's not just a war on coal. It's a war on the use of carbon-based fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, which supply over 80% of our energy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Chu, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as a proud co-sponsor of House Resolution 785, condemning the hate crimes, bullying, and brutal violence perpetrated against Sikh Americans and all acts of violence against Sikh Gurdwaras in the United States. In the face of unrelenting and unprovoked violence, it is clear that action must be taken. The Sikh community has a long history of contributing to this nation. Sikh farmers shaped California's agricultural industry, farming a third of the land and providing nature's bounty for others to enjoy. The very first Asian American to be elected to the U.S. Congress was a Sikh American, Dalit Singh Sound, elected in California in 1957. And Sikh temples all across the country have shown their beautiful spirit, by giving free food, called langar, to everybody in the neighborhood who is hungry. And yet, time and time again, we see the good deeds of Sikh Americans met with undue violence from others. And in the wake of 9/11, this behavior spiked sharply. Just days after the attacks took place, as the soot still lingered over Manhattan and smoke still smoldered from a field in Pennsylvania, Balbir Singh Sodhi became the first victim of misplaced retaliation. He was in the gas station he had worked his entire life to own when a gunman shot at him and took his life. Through the years, the violence has not abated. Last year in Northern California, Surinder Singh and Gurmij Atwal, two elderly Sikh Americans, were doing what they always did every afternoon, taking a walk in the neighborhood, when suddenly they were shot. They were murdered in cold blood, not for money or jealousy or revenge. They were murdered because of their turbans. And then there were the overwhelmingly shocking events of August 5th of this year in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. The Sikh community was peacefully preparing meals for Sunday prayer inside their Gurdwara. But that peace was shattered without warning at the hands of a gunman filled with hate and rage. He fired discriminately and without cause, and when the smoke cleared, 6 innocent people lay dead. Although it has been more than a decade since 9/11, hysteria and stereotyping are still far too common. We must combat the growing wave of violence and intolerance that threatens the safety and liberties of the Sikh American community. Today, while the FBI tracks the overall number of hate crimes taking place, it doesn't even record attacks specifically on Sikhs, despite the fact that we've seen over and over again that Sikhs are singled out because of their appearance and faith. That's why this resolution not only denounces the violence befalling this community, we're calling on the Department of Justice to finally begin documenting and quantifying hate crimes committed against Sikh Americans. As many as 3 out of 4 Sikh boys endure torment and bullying from their peers. And so we're urging educators across the nation to help end the epidemic of bullying against Sikh youths. And we're urging law enforcement officers in every locality to do all they can to prevent violence against this and all communities. America was founded on the principles of religious freedom, acceptance, and tolerance. Let's make sure that every American can live safely and in peace. Let's make sure that every American is protected.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last week, we have watched as anti-American groups throughout the world have killed Americans, attacked our embassies, had protests, burned the American flag, destroyed our property in many parts of the world. And these events and events that have preceded them bring up that question again. These countries that we give aid to seem to be countries that there is violence against America. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the aid Americans, when they write that check to the government, our government, that we spend all over the world. Now this map here is a map of countries in the world that the United States of American taxpayer gives assistance to worldwide. You'll see there's 3 colors. The red are colors that the United States gives foreign aid to. And you can see that's most of the countries in the world, and it is most of the countries. See, there's 191 countries in the world. Sometimes there's 193, depending on whether those last 2 are really countries or not, and American taxpayers give money to 158 of them. And so you see those that are in the red. And the green represents countries that we give military aid to. And this few little blue countries, a couple in Europe, a couple in Africa, those are countries we don't give any money to, by far the minority. So you see the massive world as we know it American money goes to most of it. Now, you notice over here there's a red block in this part of the country. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you'd recognize this massive country here. That's Russia. Yes, American aid goes to Russia. And did you know, even though China controls so much of our debt, American money, yes, goes to China as well. And there's a list of the countries, and I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record the 158 countries that the United States gives aid to.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So maybe we need to rethink how we do this. You know, with all the problems we got in the United States, the taxpayers are writing checks for countries throughout the world. And here's how we vote on foreign aid. And I suspect the Senate does it the same way. We put all the countries in a list and in a bill. And out beside, the State Department usually submits an amount of money that they would like us to give to that country. And then this House votes up or down on all 158 countries. Now, maybe we ought to do business a little better. Maybe we should vote country by country. Some say, oh, it'll take too long. Hey, we're talking about American money here. It wouldn't take very long at all. I think that if we voted up or down country per country, most of these countries here, they're not going to get any aid from the United States in a bipartisan way. Of course, probably Israel would, and 80% of the money spent in Israel or given to Israel spent back in the United States. And I think most members support Israel, maybe one or two other countries, but let's vote up or down, country by country. And some of these countries that we've had unrest in the last couple of weeks, like Libya, like Egypt, maybe we need to reevaluate the money we send to them. At the very least, what we ought to do in countries like Libya and Egypt and some of these other countries that are destroying American property as we speak, who have looted, pillaged, and destroyed our embassies like in Egypt, we at least ought to take the money that we're going to give them in aid and take a portion of it out to help rebuild the embassies that are in that country and pay for the property damage. And probably take even money out we've given to Libya and pay reparations to the 4 Americans that were killed in Libya. Let's use some common sense when we're spending money overseas. And maybe we shouldn't be trying to go all over the world and play nice with people. We've had a foreign aid problem since before I was born. And we continue to give money to countries in the hopes that they will like us. Well, how's that working for you? Not too good is the way that I see it. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, we don't need to continue to support countries like Pakistan. I'm astonished we still give money to Pakistan. They harbored Osama bin Laden. They put in prison the informant that told us where he was hiding. I believe some of the money we give Pakistan ends up in the hands of the Taliban and corrupt military government. But yet we keep paying them. Now, this summer, the House did vote to cut $625 million from Pakistan. But yet when the CR came through last week, the continuing resolution, that money is back in going to Pakistan. Pakistan is just one of many examples, Mr. Speaker. We don't need to pay these countries to hate us. We don't need to pay them to betray us. They will do it for free. And that's just the way it is.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks the United States Constitution's 225th anniversary. Our Constitution is a product of realistic compromise and intelligent consensus, a trait, I might add, sorely missing in this chamber. It lays out the central principles for a democratic government and the rights that citizens can expect to enjoy in that government. And with the inclusion of 6 voting rights amendments, we have formed a more solid democracy. The voting rights amendments fundamentally changed our system of government, outlawing poll taxes in federal elections, giving ordinary Americans the right to elect their senators, and allowing the citizens of our nation's capital to vote for president, and guaranteeing that all Americans, regardless of race, religion, gender, or age, would enjoy these protections. And with these protections and these amendments, we affirmed the inherent values of our Constitution and our democracy. And the right to vote is still, to this day, the essential piece of our democracy. Think about it.
To deny an eligible voter the opportunity to vote is to undermine the very freedom that defines us as a nation. The right to vote is essential to our democracy. However, while the marches of student demonstrators and religious leaders once drove electoral reform in the United States, a new and dark movement is sweeping across the country. State lawmakers, pushed by corporate interest and driven by a cynical point of view that says we must deny other people the right to vote in order to continue to keep our power, and we must target those groups and individuals who may not agree with our point of view. And this selective process, the cynical selective process, we keep power and we only concentrate on the people and extend the privileges to those that agree with our point of view. By making new laws that are now being proposed and have passed in state legislatures, make voter registration more difficult and cumbersome, cut the availability of early voting, and require voters to present current government-issued identifications as a prerequisite to casting a ballot. These efforts threaten the integrity of our democratic system and are very clearly targeted. The new restrictions on voting would disproportionately burden African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, young voters, and Americans new to the political process. Plain and simple, the restrictive voter laws threaten to disfranchise young, poor, minority, and elderly voters who lack formal government-issued ID, despite the fact that it is more likely that an American will be struck and killed by lightning than that he would impersonate another voter at the polls. We know exactly what these voter suppression laws mean. In Texas, a federal court recently found that the Texas voter ID law violated the Voting Rights Act because it made it harder for African Americans and Latinos to vote. The court stated that evidence conclusively shows that the cost of obtaining a qualifying ID will fall more heavily on the poor, and a disproportionate number of African Americans and Latinos in Texas live in poverty. In Pennsylvania, a July 5th Philadelphia Inquirer article reported that 758,000 registered voters in Pennsylvania do not have an ID, a new state law that requires a new state law requirement for voting. That figure represents 9.2% of the state's voters that could be stopped from voting. A report by the Brennan Center for Justice found that allegations of widespread voter fraud often prove greatly exaggerated. Moreover, these claims of voter fraud are frequently used to justify policies that do not solve the alleged wrongs, but could well disfranchise legitimate voters. In some states, veterans' ID cards won't be sufficient as a photo ID to vote. In the last 12 months, in my state of Arizona, there's been an accelerated effort to suppress the vote. These new efforts represent a coordinated effort clearly designed to suppress the vote of those people who need to make sure that their government is paying attention to their needs. People of color, women, young people literally risked and some lost their lives to gain the right to vote in this nation of ours. Throughout its history, our country has tried to remove obstacles to voter participation, making the right to vote accessible to all eligible citizens. We cannot turn our back on that fundamental right. Our legacy as a nation demands better of us. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Austria, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to publicly recognize September as Suicide Prevention Month. As a member of the Military Mental Health Suicide Prevention Caucus, my goal is to increase awareness and aid in the prevention of suicide. Although suicide affects thousands of Americans each year, I'd like to take a moment to focus specifically on our veterans and men and women who are currently serving in our United States military. Suicides are increasing at an alarming rate this year for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Recent data shows that suicides are occurring at a rate of approximately 1 per day for the military. This makes suicide the second leading cause of death for our troops, surpassed only by combat. The Army in particular has seen a 22% suicide increase when comparing the first 7 months in both 2011 and 2012. But these are not just numbers and statistics. These are real soldiers and real families impacted by this growing tragedy. The Army in particular has seen, again, an increase in this, and this increase became very personal for me, again, last weekend when I attended a memorial dedication for Lance Corporal Bobby Wiley. Lance Corporal Wiley was a Lima Company Marine and the son of my classmate and friend. And as a result of Bobby's death, a loving family and nation grieve with loss. On behalf of Bobby and his family, I stand before you today to briefly discuss this growing trend and associated symptoms, as well as highlight prevention efforts within my district and nationwide by both the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs. More than 2 million troops have served in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's a lot of people who have seen war up close and personal. It can affect some of them adversely when they come back home. In fiscal year 2009 alone, 1,868 veterans of these wars made suicide attempts. Faced with the stigma of post-traumatic stress disorder, unemployment rates tipping 12% for our veterans, and a loss of the military camaraderie, many veterans report feeling purposeless upon returning home. We are aware of 3 conditions to many of the suicides of our veterans. They are post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, TBI, and depression. We know that veterans with these 3 medical conditions are at higher risk of succumbing to suicide behavior. As friends and family members of our veterans and those serving our country, there's some things that we can do. First, recognize the symptoms that could lead to serious problems. Understand where and how to get assistance while still part of the military, and know the availability of treatment after service. As a member of the Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, my colleagues and I on both sides of the aisle have had the opportunity to meet and discuss some of these very important issues. And I'm pleased with Secretary of the VA Shinseki recent outreach efforts, such as Stand By Them and Side by Side. The purpose of the joint DoD and VA Stand By Them campaign and public service announcement Side by Side is to increase awareness with focus on support networks for military members. Detection and treatment are key components required for resolution. Those closest to the military member can often see signals of distress before the member recognizes it himself or herself. The quicker the detection, the quicker the treatment. Yesterday I joined, back in my home district, Director Costi and Dr. Knapp at the Dayton VA Medical Center to bring awareness to Suicide Prevention Month. With a large geographic span of responsibility, in my district, the Dayton VA Medical Center provides services to veterans from 16 counties. During the joint press conference, at the VA, we announced the ongoing efforts and help in the promotion of the VA and DoD programs. And I know communities across our nation are doing similar awareness educational programs. As our young men and women are fighting to protect our freedoms, while they are often faced with multiple and lengthy deployments, exposed to stressful situations in combat, including death, we cannot look the other way and hope that these issues disappear. The reality is we are faced with a growing number of PTSD, TBI, depression, and suicide within our military and veterans. This is a real problem, and if we can alleviate one of the symptoms and causes of suicide, PTSD, we may set a change in the current trend line before the problem becomes completely systematic across our fighting force. Let me just say, as these members of our grateful communities to wish these brave men and women return, we need to do whatever is possible to recognize these veterans at risk and help them get the assistance they need. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Lujan. Without objection, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate a proud milestone in the history of the great state of New Mexico. This year marks the centennial anniversary of the Land of Enchantment. While filmmakers have spent years documenting the history and beauty of New Mexico, sharing the importance of our acequias, stories and history of tradition in canes of power, stories and tales told by Rodolfo Anaya, and art and landscapes captured by Georgia O'Keeffe, New Mexico has a long and rich heritage that is rooted in the shared history of a diverse population, a history that respects diversity in language, a land whose state constitution was drafted and adopted in both English and Spanish. And while Santa Fe, the city of faith, holds the distinction as the oldest capital city in the country, celebrating 400 years last year, statehood came later in 1912, when a territory known for its beautiful scenery, natural wonders, and pristine landscapes was admitted into the Union as the 47th state. New Mexico is blessed with rich culture and landmarks: Chaco Canyon, Bandelier, the Taos Gorge, and Blue Lake, the Plaza in Santa Fe. Thousands of visitors each year travel to learn of the unique traditions and spirit that make New Mexico such a special place, with blue skies, sunsets and sunrises, and starry nights you won't find anywhere else in the world. The Land of Enchantment is home to a diverse population that can trace its roots back to Spanish, Mexican, and Native American cultures, amongst others. As home to one of the richest indigenous tribal populations in the United States, New Mexico is proud of the influences and contributions of the 19 Pueblo nations, 2 Apache nations, and the Navajo Nation. These diverse cultures coming together to share a common bond of calling New Mexico home has served as a source of strength for our state, as the influence of art, architecture, and agriculture can be felt to this very day. During the past 100 years, New Mexico has a proud tradition of service to our country. In World War II, Navajo code talkers contributed to the victory of our the Allied forces, while many native sons of New Mexico sacrificed in the Battle of Bataan. In the Korean War, Hiroshi Miramura of Gallup was awarded the Medal of Honor for his distinguished service. Most recently, Santa Fe native Sergeant Leroy Petrie earned the Medal of Honor for his courageous actions in the face of great danger in Afghanistan. And in every war in between, New Mexicans have proudly defended our nation and answered the call of duty when they were needed most. New Mexico has also served our nation as a center for scientific innovation and research. Los Alamos and Cedilla National Laboratories have been home to a number of scientific endeavors that have been important priorities for our nation. Mr. Speaker, as New Mexico celebrates 100 years of statehood, we're reminded of how special this beautiful land we call home is. As a native New Mexican, it is with great pride in our past and hope for our future that I come to this floor to recognize the enduring contributions of New Mexicans during the course of our state's history. A special love for our land and water helps shape our lives. A land of faith and family, culture and tradition, and, Mr. Speaker, the best chili found anywhere in the world. Ours is a special story, an American story, one passed from one generation to the next, with our most precious lessons coming from our elders, our parents, and our grandparents. And in the words of my parents, Ben and Carmen, when they send me off on any journey when I depart from home, y que Dios les bendiga. May God bless you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request unanimous consent to